Title: Echoes of the Forgotten. Chapter 1: The Lure of the Unknown. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the cluttered room that Jake called his sanctuary. The flickering light of his old desk lamp created an almost hypnotic dance of shadows, which swayed gently to the rhythm of the cool autumn breeze sneaking through the cracked window. Dust motes floated lazily in the air, illuminated by the dim glow, but Jake hardly noticed. He was far too absorbed in the static hiss of his radio, a vintage piece he had picked up at a garage sale. Jake was an amateur radio enthusiast, a self-proclaimed signal sleuth, always on the lookout for obscure frequencies that whispered secrets of the world beyond. Tonight, as he adjusted the dials, tuning in and out of the various static-laden channels, he felt a familiar thrill course through him. The world was filled with unseen voices, and he was determined to discover what they had to say. He turned the knob carefully, hoping to find something intriguing. The hiss faded in and out, occasional bursts of static crackling to life, but most of it was just noise. Just as he was about to give up, a strange frequency broke through the chaos, a sound unlike anything he had ever heard. It was a warped, distorted signal that seemed to carry a sense of urgency. Distorted warning signals, a voice echoed, clear, yet warped, as if it was struggling to emerge from the depths of a foggy void. The words resonated with a chilling authority, sending a shiver down Jake's spine. He adjusted the dial again, heart racing. This was something worth exploring. Turn back. Do not seek the truth. The voice warped again, fading in and out like a ghostly whisper. Jake leaned closer, straining to hear more, intrigued by the eerie warning. Woodsdale. Abandoned. Forgotten. Secrets buried in the dark. The voice continued, sending prickles of fear through him. The words felt laden with unspoken dread, as if they were trying to warn him of a danger he couldn't yet comprehend. As the message played on a loop, Jake's curiosity deepened. Woodsdale. He had never heard of such a place. Was it real? He grabbed a notepad, scribbling down the words in a frantic scrawl. This was not just a random signal. It felt like a calling, a warning wrapped in mystery. He felt a compulsion to investigate. His heart raced at the thought of uncovering something hidden, something that might unlock the secrets of the mysterious broadcast. But alongside that thrill was a creeping sense of dread. What lay in Woodsdale that required a warning? As the night deepened, he could not shake the feeling that he was being drawn into something far more sinister than he had anticipated. The static in the air thickened, and he felt an oppressive weight pressing down on him, as if the very atmosphere were charged with unspoken fears. The next day, Jake delved into his research. He spent hours searching online, combing through local history archives and scouring maps. As he pieced together information, he discovered that Woodsdale was a small, nearly forgotten town that had all but vanished from existence. The last known inhabitants had mysteriously abandoned it decades ago, leaving behind crumbling buildings and whispers of a dark past. Legends spoke of strange occurrences, disappearances, unsettling noises in the woods, and a deep, pervasive sadness that seemed to cling to the very soil. Jake felt the thrill of discovery and danger intertwining, a heady cocktail that spurred him onward. He couldn't resist. He needed to see Woodsdale for himself. That evening, he packed a small bag with essentials: his radio, a flashlight, some food, and a notebook. As he prepared to leave, a storm rolled in, casting ominous shadows across the sky. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the air felt electric, charged with anticipation. Is this really a good idea? He muttered to himself, doubt creeping in as he glanced at the darkening horizon. But the call of the unknown was too strong, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he had a destiny to fulfill in Woodsdale. He grabbed his keys and headed out, determination etched on his face. The drive was filled with an unsettling silence, the road winding through dense forests and desolate fields. Rain began to fall, the rhythmic patter on the windshield becoming a haunting soundtrack to his journey. The further he drove, the more isolated he felt, as if the world was closing in around him. The last signs of civilization faded away, and the road narrowed, bordered by thick trees that loomed like silent sentinels. Shadows danced at the edge of his vision, playing tricks on his mind. Each flicker of movement made his heart race, and he struggled to keep his focus on the road ahead. After what felt like hours, he finally arrived at the outskirts of Woodsdale. The town emerged from the fog like a ghost from a forgotten past. Dilapidated buildings stood silently, their windows shattered and doors hanging off hinges. The air was heavy with a sense of desolation, the kind that wraps around you and chills you to the bone. Jake parked his car and stepped out, the rain now falling in sheets. The sound of water dripping from the eaves created an eerie melody, echoing through the streets. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves, and grabbed his flashlight. The moment he stepped onto the cracked pavement, a chill ran through him. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and he felt an inexplicable sense of being watched. He shook off the feeling, attributing it to the eerie atmosphere of the abandoned town. He moved cautiously through the streets, shining his flashlight on the remnants of homes and shops that had long been forgotten. Nature had begun to reclaim the land. Vines crawled over the cracked facades, and trees grew through the once bustling sidewalks. As he wandered deeper into the heart of Woodsdale, he stumbled upon a small park, the centerpiece being an old swing set that creaked softly in the wind. It was as if time had stopped here, leaving behind echoes of laughter that felt hauntingly out of place in the eerie silence. Jake's heart raced as he imagined the children who once played there, their joy now buried under layers of decay. He approached the swings, their chains rusted but still intact. As he reached out to touch one, a sudden chill washed over him, and he heard a faint whisper carried by the wind, brushing against his ear. "Turn back," it urged, the voice low and haunting. Startled, Jake jerked back, scanning his surroundings. The trees swayed ominously, and the shadows seemed to grow thicker, pressing in around him. He shook his head, dismissing it as the product of his imagination. He was here to find answers, and he wouldn't be deterred by mere whispers. Determined, he continued exploring the town, but unease gnawed at him. The whispers grew louder, the wind picking up speed as if trying to warn him away. Each step he took felt like a step deeper into a trap, the shadows coiling closer as the daylight waned. As darkness fell, Jake finally reached the edge of the woods, where the dense trees loomed like dark sentinels. The radio crackled to life in his backpack, the static filling the silence with a dissonant hum. The same distorted warning signal flooded back, echoing the chilling voice he had heard before. "Turn back. Darkness waits." "Enough!" Jake yelled, frustration bubbling to the surface. He pulled out his radio, adjusting the dial in a desperate attempt to clarify the transmission. "What do you want from me?" he shouted into the emptiness, his voice swallowed by the night. The radio buzzed, and the voice returned, more distorted than ever. "Find the truth, but beware the shadows. They will claim what is theirs." Fear coursed through him, but beneath it was an undeniable thrill, the allure of uncovering the mystery that had drawn him to Woodsdale. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever lay ahead. As he stepped into the woods, the shadows enveloped him, a cold embrace that sent shivers down his spine. The trees stood tall and silent, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. With each step, the darkness seemed to grow thicker, swallowing the light from his flashlight. Jake felt the weight of the atmosphere pressing down on him, the silence almost suffocating. The whispers returned, now clearer and more insistent, swirling around him like a dark fog. "Turn back! Turn back!" But he pressed forward, drawn deeper into the heart of the woods. He could feel the pulse of something ancient and malevolent lurking just beyond the veil of shadows. A primal instinct told him to flee, but curiosity pushed him onward. He stumbled upon a clearing, the moonlight spilling into the space, illuminating a stone altar covered in moss and vines. The air felt charged, crackling with energy, as if the very ground was alive with hidden secrets. Jake approached the altar, a sense of foreboding washing over him. Scattered around were remnants of what looked like offerings, old toys, trinkets, and other forgotten items left behind. The ground was stained, darkened by what he could only assume were sacrifices made to appease whatever dwelled within the woods. His heart raced as he realized the significance of this place. This was where the town's darkness thrived, feeding off the fears and regrets of those who had come before him. The radio crackled violently, and the voice returned, louder and more distorted than ever. "Welcome to your doom. Embrace the shadows, for they are your fate." "Shut up," Jake shouted, the sound of his voice echoing off the trees. Panic surged within him as the shadows began to dance at the edges of the clearing, twisting and curling like living smoke. He could feel them pressing in, wrapping around him, and he stumbled back toward the trees, desperate to escape. The whispers grew into a cacophony of voices, swirling around him, drowning out his thoughts. "Join us! Join us!" They beckoned, seductive and sinister. "No!" he screamed, forcing himself to fight against the overwhelming fear that threatened to consume him. He turned to run, but the shadows surged forward, pulling him back toward the altar. "You cannot escape your destiny!" In a blind panic, Jake tore through the trees, branches scratching at his skin as he fought against the shadows. He could feel their icy tendrils reaching for him, trying to drag him down into the darkness. The radio blared in his backpack, the distorted signals mixing with the frantic whispers that filled the air. Just as he thought he would be consumed by the darkness, he burst out of the trees, stumbling into the open space of the abandoned town. The moonlight flooded over him, and he felt the shadows recede, if only slightly. Panting heavily, he leaned against a crumbling wall, his heart racing as he fought to catch his breath. The whispers were still there, but they felt fainter now, just beyond the edge of the shadows. "You cannot run forever!" The voice taunted, echoing in the night. As he stood there, trembling, Jake realized that this was only the beginning. The darkness had made its presence known, and he could no longer ignore the truth. It was a living force, waiting for the moment to strike. The radio crackled one last time, the voice now hauntingly clear. "The choice is yours, Jake. Embrace the darkness or become its next victim." In that moment, he understood the weight of his journey. The allure of the unknown had drawn him into a nightmare from which there might be no escape. But as fear threatened to overtake him, he felt a flicker of defiance igniting within. "I will not let you win," he whispered into the night, determination washing over him. "I will uncover the truth, no matter what it takes." With that, Jake turned back toward the darkness, ready to confront the evil lurking within Woodsdale. He was determined to fight against the shadows and uncover the secrets buried deep in the heart of the town, a battle for his soul and a chance to free the lost spirits entwined in the haunting echoes of the forgotten. Chapter 2. Arrival at Eldridge Hollow. The next morning, a dense fog hung over the landscape like a heavy blanket, shrouding everything in a ghostly pallor as Jake drove toward Eldridge Hollow. The journey felt surreal, the world outside transforming into a blurred haze of grey and white. Trees lined the road, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal hands, beckoning him deeper into the unknown. The unsettling feeling of being watched settled in the pit of his stomach, but he pressed on, driven by an insatiable curiosity and a hint of reckless bravery. As he approached the town, the first signs of life appeared. Faded road signs warning of falling rocks, abandoned gas stations with cracked windows, and the occasional farmhouse standing desolately against the encroaching wilderness. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and the atmosphere grew heavier with each passing mile. Jake could feel the weight of history pressing down on him, whispering secrets that begged to be uncovered. Finally, he turned onto a narrow dirt road that led into the heart of Eldridge Hollow. The ground crunched beneath his tires, and as he drove further in, the trees loomed closer, their shadows creeping in on either side like watchful sentinels. Just ahead, the road opened up to a small clearing, and Jake caught his first glimpse of the town. Eldridge Hollow was a ghost of its former self. The buildings stood in varying states of decay, some with roofs caved in, others barely clinging to their original shapes. The streets were overgrown with weeds, and the air was eerily silent, devoid of the sounds of life. Jake parked his car and stepped out, the door creaking ominously behind him as if protesting his arrival. The moment he set foot on the cracked pavement, a shiver raced down his spine. The quiet was suffocating, broken only by the distant rustle of leaves and the faint chirping of birds. But even the birds seemed hesitant, their songs subdued in the face of the oppressive silence that enveloped the town. "Welcome to Eldridge Hollow," Jake muttered to himself, taking a deep breath as he surveyed his surroundings. What have you gotten yourself into? He began to walk through the town, the soles of his shoes crunching against the gravel. Each step felt heavy, as if the ground itself were trying to pull him down, to remind him of the weight of the past. The buildings, with their peeling paint and broken windows, seemed to watch him with hollow eyes, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just out of sight. Jake approached a dilapidated diner, its sign swinging gently in the breeze, the letters faded and barely legible. "Open 24 hours, it proclaimed, but the words felt more like a cruel joke than an invitation. He pushed the door open, wincing as it groaned on its rusty hinges. Inside, the diner was a tableau of neglect. Tables lay overturned, and chairs were scattered haphazardly across the floor. A thick layer of dust coated every surface, and the air was heavy with the scent of mildew. He could almost imagine the laughter and chatter that had once filled this place, now replaced by a ghostly silence. "Hello?" Jake called, his voice echoing off the walls. No response came, only the soft whisper of the wind outside. He walked further inside, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. Old photographs hung crookedly on the walls, smiling faces frozen in time, their eyes following him as he moved. One photograph caught his attention. A group of children standing in front of the diner, their faces lit with joy. But beneath their smiles, there was a shadow, a flicker of something darker that sent a chill coursing through him. Suddenly, he heard a noise behind him, a soft shuffling, like footsteps dragging across the floor. Jake spun around, his heart racing. "Is someone there?" he called out, but the only answer was silence. He felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end as he glanced toward the kitchen area. The door swung slightly, as if someone had just passed through. His instincts screamed at him to run, but he felt rooted to the spot, curiosity pulling him closer. With cautious steps, he approached the kitchen door, the floor creaking beneath him. The air grew colder as he entered, the light from his flashlight illuminating the shadows that clung to the corners. The kitchen was a disaster zone. Pots and pans lay strewn across the floor, and the remnants of a meal long abandoned sat cold on the counter. A lingering sense of despair hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from behind him, and Jake whirled around to see a figure darting out of the diner and into the street. Panic surged through him, and he raced after it, the sound of his footsteps pounding against the pavement. "Wait! Come back!" He burst outside, the fog thickening around him, swallowing the world in a shroud of grey. He scanned the area, heart pounding in his chest, but the figure had vanished into the mist. "Hello?" he called, his voice wavering. "Is anyone there?" The silence that followed felt suffocating. He stood there, breathless, feeling a sense of dread creeping back in. The air was heavy, thick with the remnants of whatever had just occurred, and Jake's instincts told him to leave, to get out of Eldridge Hollow before it consumed him. But the lure of the unknown kept him rooted to the spot. He had come this far. He couldn't turn back now. He returned to the diner, determination set in his jaw. There was a mystery here, one that demanded to be uncovered, and he wouldn't let fear dictate his actions. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the town, Jake felt a surge of adrenaline. He would explore the town and gather information about the bizarre signals that had drawn him here. But first, he needed to find somewhere to rest and regroup. He spotted a small motel just off the main road, its neon sign flickering dimly. The vacancy light blinked erratically, and he felt a rush of relief as he approached the front desk. An elderly woman sat behind the counter, her eyes hidden beneath thick glasses. She regarded him with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Hello," Jake said, forcing a smile. "I'd like to get a room for the night." "Got a few left," she replied, her voice raspy, like gravel sliding down a hill. "You'll want to keep your doors locked." Why's that?" he asked, feeling a twinge of unease. "Just a word of advice," she said, her eyes narrowing. "Things aren't what they used to be in this town. Best to stay close to home." Jake nodded, a chill creeping up his spine. "Right, I'll do that." He took the key she offered, a heavy brass thing that felt strangely significant in his hand. After settling into his room, Jake pulled out his radio, eager to see if the frequency had changed since he arrived. He flipped the switch and static filled the air, gradually fading into a familiar distortion. The voice crackled to life again, the tone urgent and filled with despair. "Leave. Eldridge Hollow. They are watching." Jake's heart raced. "Who's watching?" he shouted at the radio, frustration boiling over. "What are you trying to warn me about?" The response was immediate, as if the voice had anticipated his anger. "They will find you. They know you're here. The darkness feeds on those who seek the truth." Panic washed over him. He could feel the shadows creeping back into his mind, tightening their grip. "I can't leave now," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. "I need to understand what's happening here." "Understanding will not save you," the voice warned, a tremor of finality lacing its words. "Turn back while you still can." The static faded, leaving behind a suffocating silence that enveloped Jake. He was torn between the desire to flee and the insatiable need to uncover the town's secrets. As he lay in bed that night, the darkness pressed against the windows, and he could hear the wind howling outside, a mournful wail that echoed his own fears. Sleep eluded him, and he spent the hours tossing and turning, haunted by visions of the shadows closing in. Each creak of the floorboards sent his heart racing, and he felt the weight of unseen eyes watching him from the corners of the room. The radio, still tuned to the distorted frequency, remained ominously silent, as if it were biding its time. When dawn finally broke, Jake awoke to a chill in the air that cut through his resolve. The sun cast a pale light across the room, but the shadows seemed to linger, stubbornly refusing to dissipate. He got dressed, shaking off the remnants of the night, and decided to venture back into Eldridge Hollow, determined to seek answers. As he stepped outside, the cool morning air greeted him like a long-lost friend. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. The fog had lifted, revealing the full extent of the town's decay. He could hear the distant caw of crows and the rustling of leaves, the sound of life somehow both comforting and unsettling. Chapter 3. The First Distortion. The diner was a relic of a bygone era, its once vibrant colors now muted and peeling, like a forgotten memory clinging to the edge of existence. As Jake entered, the bell above the door chimed softly, sending a shiver through him, as if it were a warning that he had crossed into a place where time stood still. The air inside was thick with the scent of stale coffee and dust, a pungent reminder that this place had been abandoned long before he arrived. "Morning." The elderly woman at the booth greeted him, her voice scratchy like gravel, but there was a warmth in her gaze. "You're back. Didn't scare you off, did I?" Jake forced a smile, though he could feel the weight of her words pressing down on him. "Just wanted to grab some breakfast," he said, glancing around the empty diner. "Is it just you today?" "Looks like it," she replied, motioning toward the kitchen. "I run this place myself now. Used to have a staff, but folks don't stick around long in Eldridge Hollow." "Why's that?" Jake asked, curiosity overtaking his caution. "I heard some strange stories about this place." The woman's eyes narrowed slightly and her expression darkened. "Stories, huh? You can't believe everything you hear. Some things are better left alone." Jake hesitated, the allure of the unknown tugging at him. "I want to understand," he admitted, leaning forward, his voice low. "I heard a radio signal about this town, warnings about something dark lurking in the woods." At the mention of the radio signal, the woman's demeanor shifted. She looked around cautiously, as if ensuring no one else was within earshot. "You shouldn't be messing with that," she warned, her voice barely above a whisper. "The signals are not what they seem." "What do you mean?" Jake pressed, leaning closer, his heart racing. "What's happening here?" "People who listen too closely. They end up hearing things they shouldn't. Things that can draw the darkness to them." She paused, her eyes flickering to the window, as if she sensed something outside. "The woods hold secrets, boy. Secrets that shouldn't be disturbed." Jake felt a chill creep up his spine. "What kind of secrets?" "The kind that have taken many from this town," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "I lost my husband to it. He went into the woods one night. chasing after the whispers, and he never came back. I can still hear him calling for me, even now. The weight of her words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Jake swallowed hard, the shadows in the diner seeming to deepen around him. I didn't mean to upset you. I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. The woman's expression softened, a flicker of understanding crossing her face. It's not your fault. Curiosity has a way of leading to trouble, especially here. If you're determined to find answers, just know that they may come at a price. Jake nodded slowly, the fear in the pit of his stomach twisting tighter. I'll be careful, he promised. Good, she said, her tone returning to the gravelly warmth. Now, what can I get you for breakfast? Just coffee and a slice of pie, please, he replied, forcing a smile. As she moved to the kitchen, Jake looked around the diner, absorbing the quiet, haunting atmosphere. The photographs on the wall caught his attention again, but they now felt even more unsettling. The faces in the images seemed to stare back at him, their smiles frozen in time, hiding something behind their eyes, something he couldn't quite grasp. When the woman returned with his order, Jake took a sip of the coffee, its bitterness cutting through the tension in the air. He watched as she moved about the diner, her movements efficient, yet filled with an underlying sadness. Do you ever get any visitors? He asked, trying to lighten the mood. Not many, she replied, her gaze distant. The last tourists left long ago. Most folks around here know better than to linger. The stories, they scare people off. Those who come usually leave with more questions than answers. Have you ever heard the radio signals? Jake inquired, curiosity getting the better of him. What do you think they mean? Her expression darkened, and she leaned closer. Listen to me, son. Some things are better left unheard. The signals you're chasing, they're warnings. They lead to places you don't want to go. Trust me on that. A shiver ran down Jake's spine, and he felt the weight of her words sink into his mind. What's in the woods? He pressed, desperation creeping into his voice. Eldridge Hollow was built on something ancient, she said quietly, a darkness that has lingered for centuries. The woods are alive with it, hungry and waiting. It preys on the weak, feeding on their fears. Jake's heart raced, a mix of fear and excitement flooding him. He knew he was getting closer to the truth, but with each revelation, the shadows seemed to loom larger. I have to see for myself, he whispered, half to himself. The woman's eyes widened, and she shook her head. Don't, you'll be walking into a trap. You don't know what you're dealing with. I need to understand what's happening here, he insisted, the determination in his voice unwavering. Fine, she said finally, her tone resigned. Just know that once you step into those woods, there's no turning back. You might find what you're looking for, but you may not like it. There are things that should remain hidden. With that, she returned to her work, leaving Jake to contemplate her words. The diner was silent except for the sound of rain pattering against the windows and the soft hum of the fridge. The uneasy atmosphere pressed in around him, but he felt a surge of resolve. After finishing his pie, Jake thanked the woman and left the diner, the door swinging shut behind him with a soft creak. The rain had eased into a drizzle, and the air felt charged, heavy with the promise of something lurking just beyond the edge of reality. As he walked down the empty streets of Eldridge Hollow, he felt the pull of the woods growing stronger. He could hear whispers in the wind, beckoning him closer, urging him to uncover the truth that lay hidden within the darkness. He reached the edge of the woods, standing at the boundary where the trees loomed like ancient guardians, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The shadows danced beneath the canopy, and a chill ran through him as he peered into the darkness. With a deep breath, Jake stepped forward, crossing the threshold into the woods. The moment he did, the air changed, thickening with an almost palpable energy. The light from the outside world faded, swallowed by the shadows that loomed overhead. He switched on his flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness, illuminating the twisted trees and tangled underbrush. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the sound of his footsteps crunching against the leaves. The shadows seemed to shift around him, flickering at the edges of his vision, and the whispers grew louder, echoing his thoughts. Find the truth. Discover the secrets. The deeper he ventured into the woods, the more he felt the weight of the atmosphere pressing down on him. It was as if the very air was thick with dread, wrapping around him like a vice. Every rustle in the underbrush made him jump, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He walked for what felt like hours, the trees growing denser and the light dimmer. The whispers seemed to guide him, leading him deeper into the heart of the forest. Jake felt a strange mix of fear and excitement, each step drawing him closer to whatever mystery awaited him. Finally, he stumbled upon a small clearing, where the moonlight filtered through the branches above. In the center stood an ancient stone altar, covered in moss and surrounded by crumbling rocks. The air felt charged with energy, as if the very ground hummed with a life of its own. Jake approached cautiously, feeling an irresistible pull toward the altar. It was covered in strange symbols, etched deep into the stone, and he recognized some of them from his research on local folklore. They seemed to glow faintly, pulsing with a rhythm that matched the beating of his heart. He reached out to touch the stone, and the moment his fingers made contact, a jolt of energy shot through him. Visions flooded his mind, images of the town, its people, and the darkness that had consumed them. He saw faces twisted in fear, shadows swallowing the light, and felt the weight of despair pressing down on him. "Jake!" A voice echoed in his mind, familiar yet distorted. "You must listen. Find the truth." Suddenly the ground trembled beneath him, and the shadows around the altar began to swirl, forming a dark figure that loomed over him. Jake stumbled back, heart racing as he faced the manifestation of his fears. The figure was shrouded in darkness, its eyes glowing like embers, filled with a malevolent hunger. "Why do you seek the truth, boy?" it hissed, voice like ice. "What makes you think you can uncover what is hidden?" Jake felt a surge of terror, but beneath it lay a flicker of defiance. "I want to understand what happened here," he shouted, trying to steady his trembling voice. "I need to know the truth." The figure laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the clearing. "The truth is a heavy burden, one that can consume you. You stand on the edge of darkness, and once you step forward, there may be no turning back." With a rush of adrenaline, Jake pointed his flashlight at the figure, but the light flickered, barely piercing the encroaching shadows. "I'm not afraid of you," he yelled, even as fear gnawed at him. "I will uncover the truth, no matter the cost." The shadows swirled violently around him, and the figure leaned closer, its eyes burning with an otherworldly fire. "Then embrace your fate, Jake. The darkness is calling, and it knows your name." In that moment, Jake felt the pull of the darkness, a seductive whisper that promised answers and power. It was overwhelming, intoxicating, and for a brief second, he felt tempted to surrender. But the memory of the woman's warning flashed through his mind, of the town's history and the souls lost to the darkness. With a surge of strength, he pushed back against the fear. "I won't give in," he shouted, refusing to let the darkness consume him. The figure hissed in rage, and the shadows recoiled, momentarily retreating. "You cannot escape what is part of you," it screeched, the voice echoing like thunder. Jake turned and ran, racing through the woods as panic surged through him. The darkness chased after him, whispering promises and threats, trying to lure him back into its depths. The trees seemed to close in around him, branches clawing at his skin as he fought to escape. Finally, he burst back into the clearing, gasping for breath, the moonlight illuminating his path. The shadows lingered at the edges, watching, waiting for the moment to strike again. As he stumbled back toward the diner, Jake realized he had entered a battle for his soul, a struggle against the darkness that sought to consume him. The whispers grew louder, echoing in his mind, but he refused to give in. With each step, he felt the weight of the darkness lifting, but he knew it would return. The truth was more complex than he had anticipated, and he was determined to uncover it, no matter the cost. Jake reached the diner, heart pounding as he pushed through the door. The elderly woman looked up, concern etched on her face. "You're back early," she said, her voice laced with unease. "Did you find what you were looking for?" He shook his head, breathless and shaken. "No, but I came face to face with something dark." Her expression darkened, and she leaned closer. "I warned you, boy. The woods are not to be trifled with. You must leave before it consumes you." But Jake stood firm, determination in his eyes. "I can't leave. I have to understand what's happening here. The darkness is calling and I won't turn my back on it." "Then you're a fool," she replied sharply. "You don't know the price you'll pay." As the shadows outside grew longer, Jake felt a sense of resolve settle within him. He had come to Eldridge Hollow seeking answers, and he would not back down. The darkness may be waiting, but he was ready to confront whatever lay ahead, determined to uncover the truth hidden within the whispers of the forgotten town. Chapter 4. The Disappearance. The sun rose the next day, filtering through the mist that clung to Eldridge Hollow like a ghostly shroud. Jake awoke in his motel room with a sense of urgency coursing through him. He had experienced something unsettling in the woods the night before, an encounter that felt like a warning wrapped in shadows. The whispers echoed in his mind, promising secrets and despair. He had to know more about the town's dark history, particularly the recent disappearance of a young girl named Sarah. After a quick breakfast at the diner, Jake returned to his room and began to research Sarah's case. The old laptop he had brought with him flickered to life, the screen casting a dim glow in the otherwise dark room. He typed "Eldridge Hollow disappearance" into the search bar, his fingers trembling with anticipation. The results were sparse, with most articles buried deep in local archives. He found a few references to Sarah, a bright-eyed teenager who had seemingly vanished without a trace while wandering the woods. As he read, he felt a cold knot of fear tighten in his stomach. Sarah's mother had reported her missing after she failed to return home from a late afternoon walk. The police had conducted searches, but nothing had turned up. No clues, no signs, just a haunting silence that settled over the town like a heavy fog. The last sighting of her had been near the old stone altar in the woods, the very place Jake had stumbled upon the previous night. Determined to uncover the truth, Jake decided to visit Sarah's house. He felt a strange sense of duty to the girl, as if her spirit was calling out to him, urging him to uncover what had happened. He gathered his things and headed back into the heart of Eldridge Hollow, the echoes of the whispers still ringing in his ears. As he walked down the desolate streets, he noticed the townspeople peering out from behind drawn curtains and cracked doors, their faces pale and haunted. Their watchful eyes followed him, filled with a mix of curiosity and dread. Jake felt a wave of paranoia wash over him, but he pressed on, focusing on his mission. After a few wrong turns, he found the small, weathered house where Sarah had lived. It stood at the end of a narrow road, its paint peeling and the garden overgrown, a reflection of the town's forgotten glory. The air felt heavy as he approached, a sense of foreboding curling around him like a cold wind. He knocked on the door, the sound echoing in the stillness. Moments later, it creaked open, revealing Sarah's mother, a woman with tired eyes and a face etched with grief. She looked at him with a mixture of hope and suspicion. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm Jake," he introduced, feeling a lump form in his throat. "I'm investigating the disappearance of your daughter. I want to help if I can." At the mention of Sarah's name, her mother's expression hardened, and a flicker of pain crossed her face. "Why would you want to do that?" she asked, stepping back slightly, as if she were trying to keep a painful memory at bay. "I heard the stories," Jake replied, struggling to find the right words. "I want to understand what happened. I feel like there's something dark connected to her disappearance, something I need to uncover." The woman's eyes filled with tears, and she wiped them away angrily. "You think you can just walk in here and play detective? You don't know what we've been through. The town is cursed. Everyone knows that." "Cursed?" Jake echoed, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "It's the woods," she said, her voice trembling. "Something in those woods took my daughter. We warned her not to go there, but she was a curious girl. She didn't listen. And now she's gone." Jake felt a chill run down his spine as he listened to her words. "What do you think took her?" he asked gently, trying to keep his voice steady. "The darkness," she replied, her gaze distant as if she were reliving the moment Sarah vanished. "The whispers that come from the trees. It calls to you, lures you in with promises, and then it takes you. I've heard the stories too. People who have vanished without a trace, swallowed by the woods. Do you think she heard the whispers? Jake asked, feeling the weight of her pain pressing down on him. I know she did, Sarah's mother said, her voice breaking. We all did. But I thought it was just stories to scare children. I never imagined it would happen to us. Jake took a deep breath, his mind racing with thoughts. The radio signals, the shadows, the warnings, it all seemed interconnected. Is there any place in the woods where she might have gone? He asked, urgency creeping into his tone. Any specific area? She hesitated, looking conflicted, but then pointed toward the edge of town. The old stone altar. That's where she was last seen. I warned her about it. The stories. They say it's a place of power, a place where the darkness gathers. Jake nodded, determination igniting within him. Thank you. I'll find her. I promise. As he turned to leave, he felt her hand grasp his arm. Please be careful, she urged, her voice trembling. The woods are dangerous, and the darkness is real. You don't know what you're dealing with. I'll be cautious, he assured her, feeling the weight of her fear. I won't let it take me. And the moment he stepped back outside, the air felt charged, filled with an electricity that set his nerves on edge. The townspeople watched him closely, their expressions a mix of concern and dread. As he made his way toward the edge of the woods, he felt their eyes boring into his back, the weight of their unspoken warnings pressing down on him. Jake reached the boundary where the trees stood like ancient sentinels, their branches twisting and reaching toward the sky. The whispers he had heard before began to echo in his mind again, low and enticing, weaving through the leaves like a malevolent wind. Come closer. Find the truth. Don't be afraid. He hesitated, heart pounding in his chest. The temptation to turn back tugged at him, but he steeled himself against it. He had come too far, and the disappearance of Sarah felt like a puzzle he needed to solve. With his flashlight in hand, Jake crossed the threshold into the woods, the light cutting through the thickening shadows. The atmosphere shifted immediately, the air growing colder and the sounds of the outside world fading away. The rustle of leaves and the distant call of birds were replaced by an eerie silence, thick and oppressive. As he ventured deeper, he could feel the shadows closing in around him, as if the woods were alive, watching, waiting for him to make a mistake. The trees seemed to shift and sway, their trunks bending slightly, as if they were whispering secrets to one another. The air felt charged, heavy with an unnameable energy that prickled at his skin. Jake pressed on, driven by a mix of fear and determination. He recalled the mother's words about the stone altar, and as he made his way through the dense underbrush, he felt a strange pull, as if the very ground was guiding him toward it. After what felt like an eternity of navigating the tangled roots and thorns, he stumbled into a small clearing. The moonlight broke through the branches above, illuminating a moss-covered stone structure in the center, the altar. Jake approached it cautiously, feeling the weight of history pressing down on him. The altar was adorned with strange symbols, ancient markings etched into the stone, and a layer of moss clung to its surface like a shroud. He could almost feel the energy pulsing from it, a dark resonance that beckoned him closer. As he studied the altar, the whispers grew louder, filling his mind with disjointed phrases. Find her. Don't leave. Embrace the darkness. Stop, Jake shouted, clenching his fists. I won't give in. But the whispers persisted, swirling around him like a tempest. He felt dizzy, disoriented by the cacophony of voices urging him to surrender. He needed to concentrate, to remember why he was here. He needed to find Sarah. With trembling hands, he began to circle the altar, searching for any sign of what might have happened. As he reached the opposite side, he noticed something half buried beneath the moss, an object glinting in the moonlight. He bent down, heart racing, and uncovered a small silver locket. Jake's breath caught in his throat as he recognized it. It was identical to the one Sarah's mother had shown him in a photograph. The realization struck him like a punch to the gut. This is hers, he whispered, fear coursing through him. A rush of cold wind whipped through the clearing, sending a chill down his spine. The whispers grew frantic, echoing louder, drowning out his thoughts. You shouldn't have come. Turn back. Suddenly the shadows thickened around him, coiling like a living thing. Jake scrambled to his feet, clutching the locket tightly as panic surged within him. No, I'm not afraid of you, he shouted, his voice ringing with defiance. But the shadows were relentless, surging forward as the whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar. You are weak! You will join her! Just as Jake felt the darkness closing in, he remembered the stories he had heard from the townspeople. The shadows fed on fear and desperation. With a surge of determination, he pressed the locket against his heart and focused on the light within him. I will not be consumed, he yelled, feeling the warmth radiate from the locket, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. I choose to fight! The shadows shrieked, twisting and writhing as the light surged forth, illuminating the clearing with a brilliant glow. The whispers faltered, and the oppressive presence began to recede. No, you cannot resist! The darkness screamed, its voice filled with rage. Jake's heart raced as he concentrated, pouring every ounce of strength into the light that burst forth from the locket. I will uncover the truth, he declared, and the brilliance illuminated the clearing, banishing the shadows back into the depths of the woods. As the light faded, Jake stood in the clearing, panting heavily, the locket still pulsing with warmth in his hand. The whispers had fallen silent, but he knew the darkness would return. He had uncovered a piece of the puzzle, but the truth was still shrouded in mystery. Determined, Jake left the clearing and made his way back through the woods, the weight of what he had found pressing heavily on his mind. He had to speak with Sarah's mother again, to let her know he had found something of her daughter's. As he reached the edge of the woods, he felt a sense of resolve solidifying within him. He was not just searching for answers. He was on a quest to confront the darkness that had consumed Eldridge Hollow. The shadows may loom, but he would face them head-on, determined to uncover the secrets buried in the heart of the town. As he approached the diner, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the pavement. The warmth of the day was fading, and the coolness of the evening sent a shiver down his spine. He stepped inside, the bell jingling softly, and looked for Sarah's mother, hoping she would be there. The diner was empty, save for the elderly woman who had served him before. She looked up, her eyes filled with concern. You're back, she said, her voice trembling. Did you find anything? Jake nodded, his heart racing. I found Sarah's locket, he said, pulling it from his pocket. It was at the stone altar in the woods. She was there. I can feel it. The woman's eyes widened, and she leaned closer. You must be careful, boy. The darkness is watching. It knows you've been poking around. I need to talk to her mother, Jake insisted, urgency flooding his voice. She needs to know what I found. The woman hesitated, looking toward the back of the diner. She hasn't been here since the day Sarah went missing. I think she's given up hope. No, Jake said, determination flooding through him. I can't let her give up. I need her to know the truth. Then go, the woman said, her voice firm. But be careful. The darkness is not forgiving, and it will not let you leave unscathed. Jake nodded, steeling himself for what lay ahead. He stepped back outside, the shadows lengthening as the sun dipped below the horizon. He could feel the weight of the darkness settling in, but he wouldn't let it deter him. He had come too far, and he would find Sarah's mother, no matter what it took. With resolve, Jake walked toward the house, the echoes of the past guiding his steps. The darkness may loom, but he was ready to face whatever awaited him in Eldridge Hollow. The truth was waiting to be uncovered, and he was determined to bring it to light. Chapter 5. Into the Woods. The moment Jake stepped back into the woods, a shiver ran down his spine. The shadows loomed larger than before, thickening the air with an unsettling weight. The locket pressed against his chest, a faint warmth radiating from it, as if it sensed the encroaching darkness. He could hear the whispers again, low and insistent, threading through the trees like a malevolent wind. Find her. She's waiting. Don't be afraid. He pushed deeper into the forest, the faint light of the day dwindling as the canopy overhead thickened. The branches twisted like skeletal fingers, intertwining to block out the sun. Jake felt the chill seep into his bones, the air growing colder with each step. The underbrush rustled with unseen life, and every snap of a twig sent his heart racing. After the encounter with Sarah's locket, the urgency to uncover the truth burned inside him. He needed to find the stone altar again, to delve deeper into whatever mystery lay hidden within the heart of these woods. With the weight of Sarah's disappearance pressing on him, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being drawn towards something significant, something that would unlock the truth he desperately sought. As he walked, the light from his flashlight flickered, casting long, darting shadows across the ground. He could feel the woods closing in around him, the whispers growing louder, more frantic. "Come closer. Embrace the darkness. She is waiting." Jake clenched his jaw, fighting against the primal urge to turn back. "No!" he shouted into the stillness, his voice echoing in the depths of the trees. "I won't give in to you." But the shadows swirled, shifting like a living thing, wrapping around his thoughts and squeezing tight. "You cannot resist," they taunted, the voices melding into a chorus of despair. "The darkness is part of you." He stumbled forward, determined to push past the fear. The further he went, the more he felt the pull of the altar guiding him. The symbols carved into the stone echoed in his mind, beckoning him closer. He needed to understand what the altar represented, what power it held, and how it connected to Sarah's fate. After what felt like an eternity of navigating through the dense underbrush, he finally arrived at the clearing. The moon hung low in the sky, its silver light breaking through the clouds, illuminating the stone altar at the center of the glade. It stood there, ancient and foreboding, the moss covering it like a shroud, and the symbols glowed faintly in the darkness. Jake approached slowly, feeling the energy pulsating from the stone. As he drew closer, the whispers intensified, wrapping around him like a cold fog. "Find her. She's here. You must know the truth." He reached the altar, running his fingers over the intricate carvings. They felt warm to the touch, as if imbued with a life force of their own. The air crackled with energy, and Jake closed his eyes, trying to focus on the whispers, attempting to decipher their meaning. "Sarah," he murmured, feeling a connection to the lost girl. "Where are you?" In response, a sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, chilling him to the bone. The whispers turned into a cacophony of voices, rising and falling like waves crashing against the shore. "Join us. Join her. Become one with the shadows." "No!" Jake yelled, shaking his head violently. "I won't succumb to you." Just then, the wind stilled, and an eerie silence settled over the clearing. The shadows pulled back, momentarily retreating as if they were waiting for something. Jake felt the weight of their gaze upon him, and in that silence, he sensed a presence, an energy that felt both inviting and sinister. He took a deep breath, feeling a surge of determination. "I'm here for you, Sarah," he called out into the darkness. "I won't abandon you." As the last words left his lips, the shadows coalesced at the edge of the clearing, forming into a dark figure that loomed over him. Jake's heart raced as he faced the entity, its form shifting and twisting, a mass of shadows that seemed to absorb the very light around it. "Why do you seek her?" the figure hissed, its voice low and gravelly, echoing like thunder in the stillness. "You have no idea what you are meddling with." "I need to know the truth!" Jake shouted, trying to keep his voice steady in the face of the malevolent presence. "I won't let her memory fade away. I won't let the darkness win." The figure laughed, a sound that sent chills racing down his spine. "The truth is a heavy burden, boy. You think you are brave, but bravery can quickly turn to madness in these woods." The shadows surged forward, wrapping around Jake's ankles, trying to pull him into the depths of despair. He fought against them, drawing on the light from the locket, feeling its warmth pulsating stronger with each heartbeat. "I will not be consumed by you," he yelled, the light flaring brightly, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. The figure shrieked in rage, the shadows thrashing violently. "You cannot resist what is already part of you," it howled, its voice reverberating through the clearing. Jake felt a rush of energy as he pressed the locket against his chest, focusing on the warmth emanating from it. "I choose to fight," he shouted, the light intensifying, illuminating the clearing in a radiant glow. "I will uncover the truth, no matter the cost." As the light burst forth, The shadows recoiled, twisting and writhing in agony. The figure dissipated into a swirl of darkness, the whispers fading into a desperate cacophony of shrieks. "You cannot escape your fate," it screamed, but the brilliance of the locket pushed the shadows back, consuming the darkness that had threatened to engulf him. Breathless, Jake stood in the clearing, the light flickering and fading as the shadows retreated. The whispers were gone, replaced by an oppressive silence. He felt a sense of relief wash over him, but he knew this was only a temporary reprieve. The darkness would return. He glanced around the clearing, taking a moment to gather his thoughts. The stone altar felt alive with energy, and Jake could sense that it held the key to understanding what had happened to Sarah. He needed to dig deeper. As he turned back to the altar, he noticed something glinting beneath the moss, a small object half buried in the earth. With trembling hands, he reached down and unearthed it, revealing a tarnished silver bracelet adorned with delicate charms. Jake recognized it instantly. It was Sarah's, a piece of jewelry she often wore. Panic surged through him as he realized the implications of his discovery. "What happened to you, Sarah?" he whispered, his heart aching for the girl whose fate had become intertwined with his own. He could almost feel her presence lingering in the clearing, urging him to uncover the truth. Suddenly, the tranquility of the clearing shattered as a low growl echoed from the trees, reverberating through the air like a warning bell. Jake's heart raced, adrenaline flooding his veins. He quickly tucked the bracelet into his pocket and turned to leave. But the shadows began to swirl again, gathering at the edges of the clearing. With every step, he could feel the darkness clawing at his heels, the whispers returning, now laced with urgency. "Run, Jake! They are coming for you!" Jake's instincts kicked in, and he sprinted through the trees, the flashlight beam cutting through the suffocating darkness. The growl grew louder, echoing through the woods, a primal sound that sent chills racing down his spine. He didn't look back. He focused on the path ahead, heart pounding with fear and determination. As he burst into the open, the moonlight flooded the clearing, and he caught his breath, the adrenaline still coursing through him. He felt the weight of the darkness lifting, but he knew it was only a matter of time before it returned. Jake raced back toward the diner, the figure of the dark entity still fresh in his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being hunted, that something was waiting for him in the shadows. As he approached the diner, the door swung open, and the elderly woman stood there, her face pale and lined with concern. "What happened?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I found Sarah's bracelet," he replied, panting for breath, "and I encountered something in the woods. Something dark. It warned me to leave." She stepped back, shock crossing her face. "You shouldn't have gone there. The woods are not safe. They'll try to draw you in, to make you part of their darkness." "I need to understand," Jake insisted, feeling the weight of urgency pressing on him. "I can't let Sarah's memory fade away. I have to know what happened to her." "Then you're risking your life," she warned, her expression grave. "The darkness is cunning. It will exploit your fears, use them against you. You must be careful." "I will," he promised, the fire of determination igniting within him. "I have to keep going." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the diner, Jake felt a mixture of fear and resolve. The darkness may be lurking just beyond the edge of the woods, but he was ready to confront it. He had uncovered a piece of the puzzle, but he knew the truth was still buried deep in the heart of Eldridge Hollow, and he was determined to unearth it, no matter the cost. Chapter 6. The Distorted Reality. The night settled heavily over Eldridge Hollow, wrapping the town in a cloak of darkness that felt alive and watchful. Jake stood outside the diner, the cool evening air sending shivers down his spine as he contemplated his next move. The discovery of Sarah's bracelet weighed heavily in his pocket, a reminder of the girl whose fate had intertwined with his own. He had uncovered fragments of the mystery, but the shadows were still shrouded in secrecy, and he felt the darkness lurking, waiting for him to slip. The townspeople had grown more elusive, retreating into their homes as night fell, their eyes filled with a mixture of pity and fear. Jake could feel their stares following him, an unspoken acknowledgement of the dangers he was courting. But he was undeterred. He had to press on. He needed answers, and he wouldn't allow fear to dictate his actions. With a sense of urgency, he made his way back to his motel room. The radio sat on the desk, ominously quiet, as if it too were waiting for something. Jake flipped the switch, the static crackling to life, sending a chill through him. He tuned into the frequency that had first drawn him to Woodsdale, the distorted voices echoing in his mind. "Find her. She is here. The darkness calls." "Stop!" Jake shouted at the radio, frustration boiling over. "What do you want from me?" "Embrace the shadows. Become one with the truth." The voice hissed, blending into a chaotic symphony of whispers. "You cannot escape what you are." The intensity of the whispers made his heart race, and he felt the shadows inching closer, as if they were encroaching upon his very thoughts. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus. "I won't give in," he murmured, trying to summon the courage he had felt in the woods. "I'm here to find Sarah." The radio crackled again, the voice dropping to a chilling whisper. "The truth is not what it seems. You must listen closely." Jake felt a pulse of energy emanating from the radio, the air thickening as the voices spiraled into a chaotic cacophony. He could feel reality shifting around him, the boundaries of his mind blurring with the whispers that flooded his thoughts. "No!" he shouted, grasping the edges of the desk to steady himself. "I will not succumb." But as he battled against the voices, he felt the shadows slipping into his mind, distorting his perception of reality. The room began to swirl around him, the walls pulsating as if they were breathing. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to block out the encroaching darkness, but the whispers only grew louder, clawing at his sanity. "Join us. Embrace the truth. She is waiting." Suddenly, the radio emitted a loud burst of static, jolting him back to reality. Jake gasped for breath, the room spinning before him. He opened his eyes, and the shadows began to retreat, the whispers fading into a low hum. He felt a wave of relief wash over him, but he knew it was only temporary. He had to get out of the motel, away from the oppressive atmosphere that felt suffocating. Grabbing his flashlight and the locket, he stepped outside, the cool night air hitting him like a breath of fresh life. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the town, illuminating the paths he had yet to explore. Determined, Jake headed back toward the woods, the call of the darkness pulling at him once more. The trees loomed like guardians, their branches swaying gently in the wind as he approached the edge. The whispers returned, wrapping around him, seductive and insistent. "Find her. The truth lies within. Do not be afraid." He paused at the boundary, the shadows dancing at the periphery of his vision. "I'm not afraid," he muttered, stepping forward into the embrace of the woods. The moment he crossed the threshold, the air thickened, wrapping around him like a suffocating blanket. The darkness pressed in, whispering secrets he couldn't quite understand. As he ventured deeper, Jake felt the weight of the atmosphere shift. The trees began to close in around him, the path narrowing until it was almost obscured by underbrush. The flashlight beam flickered, casting shadows that danced in rhythm with the rustling leaves. He could hear the whispers clearer now, rising and falling like the breath of the forest itself. "Join us. Embrace the darkness." "Enough!" Jake shouted, his voice echoing through the stillness. "I'm here to find Sarah, not to join you." The woods seemed to pause, and for a brief moment, the whispers quieted, replaced by an unsettling silence. The shadows slithered at the edges of his vision, lurking just beyond the light. Jake pressed on, heart pounding as he navigated the twisted paths, searching for any sign of the stone altar. As he walked, the shadows morphed and twisted, forming shapes that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. He felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over him, as if he were being watched from the depths of the forest. With each step, he could feel the darkness coiling tighter around him, and he fought against the fear that threatened to consume him. Suddenly, he stumbled upon a clearing that looked familiar. The stone altar loomed in the center, shrouded in darkness, the symbols carved into the stone glowing faintly in the moonlight. He approached cautiously, the weight of history pressing down on him as he felt the energy radiating from the altar. Jake reached out to touch the stone, and the moment his fingers made contact, a surge of electricity shot through him. Visions flooded his mind. Images of the town, its people, and the darkness that had claimed them. He saw Sarah standing in the clearing, her eyes wide with fear as shadows swirled around her. "Jake," a voice whispered, soft yet filled with urgency. "Help me." The vision faded, leaving him breathless and trembling. "Sarah," he called out, but the woods swallowed his words, the silence pressing in around him. Desperate to understand, Jake stepped closer to the altar, the symbols glowing brighter as he focused on them. He needed answers, and he needed to find a way to communicate with whatever force was at play in this cursed place. Just then, a low growl echoed from the trees, reverberating through the clearing. Jake's heart raced as he turned, flashlight shaking in his hand. The shadows thickened, coalescing into a dark figure that lurked at the edge of the light. "Who are you?" Jake shouted, trying to sound braver than he felt. "What do you want?" The figure stepped forward, its shape twisting and morphing in the darkness. "You seek the truth," it rasped, its voice a chilling whisper that echoed like a haunting refrain. "But the truth has a price." "What price?" Jake demanded, anger rising within him. "I'm not afraid of you." "You should be," the figure replied, its eyes glowing like embers in the night. "The darkness feeds on fear, and you have come seeking it willingly. You will pay for your curiosity." As the shadows began to close in around him, Jake felt panic surge within him. He had to fight back, to refuse the darkness that sought to claim him. "I won't let you take me," he shouted, pressing the locket to his chest, the warmth radiating from it a beacon of hope. With renewed determination, he focused on the light within, summoning the courage he had felt before. "I choose to fight," he declared, and a brilliant beam of light burst forth from the locket, illuminating the clearing in a dazzling glow. The figure shrieked, recoiling as the light pushed back against the shadows. "You cannot resist!" it howled, its voice filled with fury as the darkness began to dissipate. "I can, and I will," Jake shouted, pouring all of his energy into the light, determined to banish the darkness that had haunted the town for so long. The shadows twisted and writhed, screaming in agony as the brilliance consumed them, illuminating the clearing in an otherworldly glow. As the light surged forth, the figure shrieked one final time before dissolving into a cloud of darkness, the whispers fading into silence. Jake stood there, breathless, the light from the locket flickering as he caught his breath. But the victory felt hollow. He had faced the darkness and pushed it back, but he knew it would return. It was a relentless force, feeding on fear and despair, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. With resolve hardening in his chest, Jake turned back toward the path leading out of the woods. He needed to return to the diner, to speak with Sarah's mother again, and to share what he had found. The darkness was far from vanquished, and he needed all the help he could get to uncover the truth that lay buried beneath the shadows of Eldridge Hollow. As he walked, he could feel the whispers returning, swirling around him like a haunting melody. "Find her. Embrace the darkness. She is waiting," they chanted, taunting him, and with each step the shadows seemed to grow thicker, pressing in around him. Jake clenched his fists, fighting against the pull of the darkness. "I will find you, Sarah," he whispered, determination coursing through him. "I won't let you fade away. I'll uncover the truth, no matter the cost." He pushed forward, the light of the diner coming into view, a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. But as he stepped back into the light, he knew the battle was far from over. The shadows would return, and he would have to face them again. But this time, he would be ready. He entered the diner, the bell ringing softly, and spotted Sarah's mother seated in a booth, her expression a mix of hope and despair. As Jake approached, he could see the flicker of fear in her eyes, and it only fueled his resolve. "I found something," he said, urgency filling his voice. "I found Sarah's bracelet, and I saw her in the woods. The darkness is real, and it's connected to her disappearance." The woman's eyes widened, and she leaned forward, desperation etched on her face. "What do you mean? Did you find her?" "No, but I felt her presence," Jake replied, his heart pounding. "The shadows are powerful, and they feed on fear. But I'm going to uncover the truth, no matter what it takes." She stared at him, tears welling in her eyes. You're brave to face the darkness, but you must be careful. It will try to lure you in, to make you part of it. I know, Jake said, determination solidifying in his chest. But I won't let it take me. I have to keep searching for Sarah, for all the souls lost to the shadows. The woman nodded slowly, a flicker of hope igniting in her gaze. Then we will fight together. We cannot let the darkness win. With that, Jake felt a sense of purpose flooding through him. The battle was far from over, but now he had an ally in the fight against the shadows. Together, they would confront whatever lay hidden in the heart of Eldridge Hollow, determined to bring light to the darkness and uncover the truth that had haunted the town for too long. As the night deepened, Jake felt the weight of the impending confrontation pressing down on him, but he knew he was ready to face whatever horrors awaited him in the woods. The truth was calling, and he would not rest until he answered its summons. Chapter 7. The Ritual Unveiled. As night descended upon Eldridge Hollow, the air became thick with tension, crackling with energy that made Jake's skin crawl. He sat in the diner, the familiar scent of stale coffee and dust mingling with the damp chill that seeped through the walls. Sarah's mother, seated across from him, stared into her half-empty cup, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to regain her composure. "Are you sure you want to do this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What you're proposing, it's dangerous. The darkness doesn't take kindly to those who challenge it." Jake leaned forward, his determination shining in his eyes. "I have to know the truth, for Sarah's sake, and for the others who've vanished. We need to confront whatever darkness is lurking in those woods. I can't just sit back and do nothing." Her gaze met his, a mixture of fear and admiration reflecting in her tired eyes. "The townsfolk won't help you. They fear the woods and the darkness that resides there. Many have tried to unveil the truth and they've never returned. I can't let that stop me," Jake replied, his heart pounding with urgency. "We have to try. If we gather enough information, maybe we can perform a ritual that can protect us, or even banish the darkness." Her brow furrowed, uncertainty etched across her face. "You believe in rituals?" she asked, skepticism creeping into her tone. "This isn't some fairy tale, Jake. The darkness is real, and it preys on fear. It won't just vanish because we say a few words." "I know it sounds crazy," he admitted, "but I felt the power of the altar in the woods. There's something there. Something that connects all the disappearances. If we can unlock its secrets, we might stand a chance." Sarah's mother sighed deeply, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I want to believe you. I want to find my daughter. But the price of truth in Eldridge Hollow is steep. You must be prepared for what you might uncover." With a resolve that surprised even him, Jake nodded. "I'm ready to face whatever lies ahead." They spent the rest of the evening gathering supplies, delving into old books that spoke of the rituals tied to the town's dark history. The stories were filled with chilling accounts of offerings made to the forest, rituals designed to appease the entities that dwelled within the shadows. As they flipped through the brittle pages, Jake felt the weight of the past settling over him, a palpable reminder of the lives lost to the darkness. "We need to gather items for the ritual," he said, his fingers brushing over the fragile pages. "Things that symbolize light and protection, candles, herbs, anything that can help us push back against the shadows." Sarah's mother nodded, her expression shifting from despair to determination. "I have some herbs from my garden that I used for protection. I'll gather them, along with some candles from the local shop. We'll need all the help we can get." As they prepared, Jake felt a mixture of hope and dread. The prospect of confronting the darkness was both thrilling and terrifying. He knew the risks involved, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of uncovering something monumental, a truth that had been buried for far too long. When dawn finally broke, Jake and Sarah's mother set out into the woods, armed with the supplies they had gathered. The air was heavy with anticipation, and the forest seemed to hold its breath as they made their way toward the clearing where the stone altar stood. With each step, Jake felt the shadows closing in around them, whispering in hushed tones, urging him to turn back. But he pushed the fear aside, focusing on the task ahead. They arrived at the clearing, the stone altar bathed in golden sunlight, a stark contrast to the darkness that had loomed there just days before. "Here," Sarah's mother said, laying out the herbs and candles on the altar, her hands steady despite the palpable tension in the air. "We'll start with the protective circle. It's important that we shield ourselves from the darkness." Jake helped her arrange the candles in a circle around the altar, their flickering flames casting dancing shadows against the stone. He felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him, and as they lit the candles, he could feel the energy in the air shift, the atmosphere becoming charged with anticipation. "Now we need to speak the words," Sarah's mother said, her voice steady, but filled with an undercurrent of fear. "The incantation is meant to call upon the forces of light to protect us. We must be clear and united in our intention." Jake nodded, his heart racing as they stood together before the altar. The air grew thick with tension, the whispers echoing around them, rising and falling like a dark tide. He could feel the shadows pressing closer, waiting for a moment of weakness to strike. As they began to chant the incantation, Jake's voice mingled with Sarah's mother's, the words resonating in the stillness of the woods. "By the light that guides us, by the strength within, we call upon the forces to shield us from the sin. Let the shadows recede, let the darkness retreat, protect us from the evil, and grant us safe passage." The moment the words left their lips, the shadows surged forward, a dark wave that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Jake felt a cold rush of wind whip through the clearing, extinguishing the candles and plunging them into darkness. Panic surged through him, and he grasped Sarah's mother's arm tightly, fear igniting in his chest. "Keep going!" he shouted, struggling to maintain his focus as the darkness writhed around them. "Don't stop!" With renewed determination, they continued to chant, their voices rising above the cacophony of whispers that clawed at their minds. "By the light that guides us, by the strength within." The shadows twisted violently, trying to drown out their words, but they pressed on, desperation fueling their resolve. Suddenly the wind howled, and a figure emerged from the darkness, looming over the altar. Jake's heart raced as he recognized the dark entity from the woods, its form shifting and morphing with a grotesque fluidity. "You think your words can protect you?" it hissed, voice echoing like thunder. "You are foolish to challenge me." "Get back!" Jake shouted, fear igniting within him. "We won't let you take us." The entity laughed, a chilling sound that resonated through the clearing. "You are nothing but children playing with forces beyond your understanding. You will join the lost souls." As the figure lunged forward, Jake and Sarah's mother stood their ground, continuing to chant, pouring all their energy into the protective spell. "Let the shadows recede, let the darkness retreat." But the shadows lashed out, coiling around them, dragging at their minds as they fought to maintain their focus. "Join us. Embrace the darkness. It's the only way." "Stay strong," Sarah's mother shouted, her voice rising above the din. "We will not succumb." With a surge of determination, Jake pressed the locket to his chest, feeling its warmth pulsing in time with his heartbeat. "I choose to fight," he cried, his voice ringing with defiance. "I will not be consumed." The moment the words left his lips, a brilliant light erupted from the locket, illuminating the clearing in a blinding glow. The shadows shrieked, twisting and writhing as the light pushed back against the darkness. "No!" the figure screamed, its form flickering as the brilliance engulfed it. "You cannot escape your fate." As the shadows dissipated, Jake felt the energy shifting around them. The oppressive weight began to lift, the whispers fading into silence as the figure was consumed by the light. Breathless, he stood in the clearing, the flickering flames of the candles reigniting as the darkness receded. Jake turned to Sarah's mother, both of them panting from the exertion. "Did we do it?" he asked, hope flickering in his chest. I think so," she replied, looking around as if trying to comprehend what had just happened. "But we can't let our guard down. It will return, and we must be prepared." As the light of the candles cast warm shadows across the altar, Jake felt a sense of clarity wash over him. The darkness was far from vanquished, but they had pushed it back for now. They needed to find a way to fortify their defenses, to uncover the truth behind the entity that had plagued the town for so long. "We should head back," he suggested, glancing at the fading light. "We need to regroup and figure out our next steps. There's still so much we don't understand." Sarah's mother nodded, determination flickering in her eyes. "Let's go. We need to share what we've learned and prepare for the next battle." As they made their way back through the woods, the atmosphere felt different. The shadows no longer pressed in on them, but Jake could sense that the darkness was merely waiting, lurking just out of sight, biding its time. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. When they finally reached the diner, Jake felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The familiar sight of the building offered a moment of comfort, but the unease in his gut reminded him of the fight still ahead. They stepped inside, the bell jingling softly, and Jake caught the worried expression of the elderly woman behind the counter. "You're back," she said, concern etched on her face. "I felt something shift in the woods. It felt wrong." "We face the darkness," Jake replied, urgency in his voice. "But it's still out there, and it's not going to stop. We need to gather everyone who has been affected by this, anyone who might have information about the darkness." The woman nodded slowly, the weight of his words settling heavily in the air. "You're right. We need to unite against it, to protect ourselves and our town." Jake and Sarah's mother began to formulate a plan, knowing they needed to rally the townsfolk, to bring them together against the encroaching darkness. As they discussed strategies, a sense of purpose ignited within him. They were no longer alone in their fight. They would stand together against the shadows. But as they made their preparations, Jake felt the shadows lurking at the edges of his mind, whispering promises and threats. The battle was far from over, and he knew they would need to be stronger than ever to confront the malevolent force that threatened to consume Eldridge Hollow. With each passing moment, the call of the darkness grew louder, and Jake steeled himself for the fight ahead. He would not rest until he uncovered the truth and found a way to banish the shadows that had claimed so many lives. The light within him would shine brighter, illuminating the path to redemption and hope for those lost in the darkness. Chapter 8. Into the Abyss. The air was thick with anticipation as Jake and Sarah's mother gathered their meager supplies and prepared to confront the darkness once more. The diner buzzed with an uneasy energy, the townsfolk now aware of the impending confrontation that lay ahead. Whispers of the ritual spread through Eldridge Hollow like wildfire, and fear laced every conversation. But Jake felt a flicker of hope amidst the anxiety. "Tonight, we face it," Jake said, determination etched across his face. He glanced around the diner, where several townspeople had gathered, their faces pale but resolute. "We need to banish the darkness once and for all." "Are you sure we're ready?" a voice called from the back, a local farmer named Tom, who looked particularly uneasy. "What if it's too strong?" "We have to try," Jake replied, his voice steady, though inside doubt gnawed at him. "We've faced it before, and we can do it again, together." As the group nodded, Sarah's mother stepped forward, clutching the herbs and candles they had gathered. "We've performed rituals before, but this one will be different. We need to draw upon our collective strength, our memories of those we've lost. It's not just about words, it's about intention." The weight of her words hung heavily in the air, and Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the edge of something monumental, teetering on the brink of a truth that could either save them or plunge them deeper into despair. With the last remnants of daylight fading, the group ventured into the woods, the path ahead shrouded in shadows. Jake led the way, flashlight in hand, illuminating the twisted branches that reached out like skeletal fingers. The air felt electric, charged with a tension that made his skin prickle. "Stay close," he instructed, glancing back at the others as they followed him into the depths of the forest. The whispers returned, swirling around them like a dark fog. "Find her. She's waiting. The darkness calls." Each step they took felt heavier, the shadows thickening around them. The forest was alive with a low hum, the trees creaking as if they were alive and breathing. The closer they got to the altar, the more Jake felt the oppressive weight of the darkness, pressing down on his chest like a leaden burden. As they reached the clearing, The moon hung high in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the altar. The stone structure stood tall and imposing, the symbols etched into the surface glowing faintly as if they were alive. Jake could feel the energy pulsing beneath his skin, the whispers intensifying, swirling around them like a malevolent wind. "Here we are," Jake said, glancing back at the townsfolk. "This is where we make our stand." Sarah's mother began to arrange the herbs and candles around the altar, her movements steady despite the palpable fear that hung in the air. "We need to create a protective circle. We must channel our energy into the ritual, focusing on what we've lost and what we want to reclaim." Jake watched as the townspeople gathered around the altar, their faces etched with determination and dread. He felt a sense of camaraderie, knowing they were all united in their purpose. They lit the candles, their flames flickering like tiny beacons against the darkness that threatened to engulf them. "Let's begin," Sarah's mother said, her voice steady. "We need to call upon the spirits of those we've lost. We must honor their memories and ask for their guidance." As they joined hands around the altar, Jake felt the warmth of their connection pulsing through him. He closed his eyes and focused on the light within, drawing upon the memories of those who had disappeared. Sarah, her mother's grief, the pain that had settled over Eldridge Hollow like a shroud. "By the light that guides us, we call upon those who have been lost," they chanted together, their voices rising in unison. "We seek the truth and the strength to banish the darkness that binds us." The wind picked up, howling through the trees, and Jake felt the shadows pressing in, but he held firm, focusing on the flickering flames. "We will not be afraid," he shouted, his voice cutting through the howling wind. "We stand united against the darkness." As they continued to chant, the symbols on the altar began to glow brighter, pulsing with a life of their own. Jake felt the energy surge, a powerful force that coursed through the ground and into their feet. The darkness responded, swirling around them, attempting to drown out their voices. "Join us. Embrace the shadows." The whispers echoed, rising to a deafening crescendo. "You cannot escape your fate." But Jake pushed back, the light within him flaring as he concentrated on the warmth of the locket. "We choose the light," he shouted, determination fueling his voice. "We will uncover the truth." Suddenly, the shadows surged forward, coiling around them like a living entity, their whispers morphing into a chaotic cacophony that clawed at their minds. The darkness was trying to break their concentration, to drive them apart. Jake could feel the pull of despair, but he refused to let it take hold. "Stay strong," he urged the townsfolk, their hands still gripping his. "Focus on the light, on those we've lost." The shadows twisted violently, a dark figure emerging from the depths, its form shifting and swirling in the chaos. Jake recognized it immediately, the same entity that had confronted him in the woods, now manifesting before them with an otherworldly presence. "You think your words can protect you?" the figure hissed, voice dripping with malice. "You are weak. You will pay for your defiance." Jake's heart raced, but he stood his ground. "We will not back down. We will fight for those who can't." The figure laughed, a sound that echoed through the clearing, sending chills down his spine. "You are foolish to challenge me. You know nothing of the darkness that dwells within these woods." As the figure lunged toward them, the candles flickered wildly, the shadows closing in around them. Jake felt the darkness pressing against his mind, trying to worm its way into his thoughts, to exploit his fears. "Don't listen to it," he shouted, trying to rally the townsfolk. "Focus on the light," Sarah's mother cried, her voice unwavering. "Remember those we've lost, the love we have for them." With a surge of determination, Jake pressed the locket against his heart, feeling its warmth radiate through him. "We will not be consumed," he yelled, pouring every ounce of strength into the light. "We are stronger together." The light erupted from the locket, illuminating the clearing in a blinding brilliance that pushed back against the shadows. The figure screeched, its form flickering as the shadows writhed and twisted, desperately trying to escape the light. "You think this will save you?" it howled, the darkness thrashing violently as it was driven back. "You will join the lost." But Jake felt the energy building within him, fueled by the memories of those they had lost. "We will not let you take us," he shouted, focusing on the light and the connection with the townsfolk. "We stand united against you. The shadows surged forward one last time, but the brilliance of the light engulfed them, consuming the darkness in a radiant explosion. The figure screamed, a sound that reverberated through the clearing as the light pushed back against the shadows, illuminating the entire glade. As the brilliance faded, Jake stood panting, the candlelight flickering gently around them. The shadows had retreated, their presence dissipating into the night. The whispers were gone, replaced by an oppressive silence that hung in the air. "We did it," Sarah's mother said, her voice trembling with disbelief. "We actually did it." Jake glanced around the clearing, feeling the weight of their victory settling over him. They had pushed back the darkness, but he knew it was only temporary. "This isn't over," he said, his voice steady. "We need to prepare for the next battle." As the townsfolk began to gather around him, their faces filled with a mix of relief and fear, Jake felt a sense of camaraderie solidifying among them. They had faced the darkness together, and in that moment he realized that they were not alone in this fight. "We need to find out more about the altar and the darkness," he urged. "There must be a way to banish it for good." "But how?" a woman named Clara asked, her voice shaking. "What if it returns stronger?" "We'll find a way," Jake said, determination flooding through him. "We'll uncover the truth behind the darkness and protect our town from its grip." As they made their way back through the woods, the atmosphere felt different. The oppressive weight had lifted, but Jake knew the darkness was merely waiting for another opportunity. The trees whispered softly in the breeze, a reminder that the shadows were still present, lurking just out of sight. When they finally emerged from the woods, the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a warm glow over Eldridge Hollow. The town looked almost peaceful, but Jake could feel the undercurrent of tension still coursing through the air. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over. They returned to the diner, where the elderly woman welcomed them with a weary smile. "You're back," she said, her eyes filled with concern. "Did you face the darkness?" Jake nodded, his expression serious. "We pushed it back, but it will return. We need to gather more information about the altar and the rituals tied to the darkness." The woman nodded slowly, her expression grave. "The altar has been a source of power for centuries. Many have tried to harness its energy, but the darkness always finds a way to reclaim what is its own." Jake felt a chill run down his spine at her words, but he refused to let fear consume him. "Then we need to learn from those who came before us. We must uncover the rituals, the sacrifices that have been made." With renewed determination, the townsfolk gathered around the table, sharing stories of the past, recounting the sacrifices made to the altar, the secrets buried deep within the woods. Jake listened intently, absorbing every detail, piecing together the history of Eldridge Hollow and the darkness that had plagued it for so long. As the sun rose higher in the sky, illuminating the diner with a warm glow, Jake felt a sense of purpose solidifying within him. He was ready to face whatever awaited him in the depths of the woods. The truth was calling, and he would not rest until he answered its summons. In that moment, he knew that the shadows would rise again, but this time, they would be prepared. Together, they would confront the darkness, unravel the secrets of the past, and fight for the souls lost to the abyss. The battle was far from over, but Jake felt a surge of hope, a light that would guide them through the darkness and into the truth that lay beyond. Chapter 9. The Battle for Control. As night fell once more over Eldridge Hollow, the atmosphere was charged with a palpable tension, the air thick with anticipation and dread. Jake gathered with the townsfolk in the diner, their faces illuminated by the flickering candlelight, shadows dancing on the walls like specters of the past. They had come together to prepare for the inevitable confrontation with the darkness that lurked in the woods, their fears woven tightly with a shared determination to reclaim their town from the clutches of evil. Jake felt a heavy weight pressing on his shoulders, the burden of leadership resting uncomfortably as he glanced around the room. The fear etched on the faces of the townspeople mirrored his own. They had faced the darkness before, but this time felt different, more sinister. There was a sense that the shadows were growing stronger, bolder, feeding off the terror that gripped the town. "Tonight we stand together," Jake said, his voice steady despite the trembling in his heart. "We've faced the darkness before and we pushed it back. But this time, We need to be prepared for its return. It will try to manipulate us, exploit our fears. We must be vigilant. Sarah's mother nodded, her expression grave. We've all lost something to the shadows. We must remember those we're fighting for. Their memories will guide us through the darkness. As they gathered around the table, Jake led them in a brief ritual, lighting candles and invoking the spirits of those who had been lost. The air grew thick with emotion, the flickering flames casting a warm glow that contrasted sharply with the cold reality that awaited them in the woods. We will confront the darkness at the altar, Jake continued, glancing at the townsfolk with a steely resolve. We will not let it take any more lives. We will reclaim our town. The group murmured in agreement, their voices filled with a mixture of fear and defiance. With their preparations complete, they set out toward the woods, the weight of their resolve propelling them forward. As they approached the boundary between town and forest, a chill crept over them, the shadows twisting ominously at the edge of the tree line. Jake stepped into the woods first, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, the townsfolk close behind. The air felt electric, charged with the anticipation of the battle ahead. Every snap of a twig sent a jolt of fear through him. Every whisper in the wind felt like a taunt from the shadows. Stay close, he urged, glancing back at the group. We need to stick together. The darkness will try to divide us. As they delved deeper into the forest, the trees closed in around them, the path narrowing as the shadows thickened. The whispers returned, wrapping around them like tendrils, curling into their thoughts. Turn back. Join us. You cannot escape. Jake pushed forward, the weight of the locket pressing against his chest, a reminder of the light within him. We won't let you take us, he shouted into the darkness, his voice steady. We choose to fight. Suddenly the shadows surged, coiling like a living creature, and a low growl echoed through the trees. The air grew thick with malevolence, a chilling reminder of the entity that haunted these woods. Jake's heart raced as he faced the encroaching darkness, the weight of the town's history pressing heavily upon him. As they reached the clearing, the stone altar stood before them, ominous and foreboding in the moonlight. The symbols etched into the stone pulsed with energy, a dark power that seemed to resonate with the shadows surrounding them. Here we are, Jake said, glancing back at the townsfolk, their expressions filled with fear and determination. This is where we stand our ground. They arranged themselves around the altar, forming a protective circle, candles flickering against the encroaching darkness. Jake felt the weight of their collective fear, but beneath it lay a flicker of hope, a resolve to confront the malevolent force that threatened their lives. As they began to chant the incantation, the wind picked up, howling through the clearing like a banshee's wail. The whispers intensified, swirling around them in a chaotic symphony. You cannot resist, the shadows screamed, the air thickening with a suffocating presence. Jake gripped the locket tightly, focusing on the light within. We will not be afraid, he shouted, determination surging through him. We stand united against the darkness. The shadows recoiled momentarily, but the figure of the dark entity emerged from the depths, its form shifting and writhing in the darkness. You think your words can protect you, it hissed, voice dripping with malice. You are fools to challenge me. The townsfolk hesitated, fear flickering in their eyes, but Jake pressed on. We've faced you before, and we'll face you again. We will uncover the truth and protect our town. The entity laughed, a sound that echoed through the clearing, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. You are nothing but ants, scurrying about, thinking you can control what is beyond your comprehension. As the figure lunged forward, shadows surged at the edges of the clearing, attempting to envelop them. Jake felt the darkness clawing at his mind, whispering his worst fears, threatening to drag him into despair. But he focused on the light of the locket, drawing strength from the memories of those who had been lost. Together, he shouted, rallying the townsfolk as they gripped each other's hands tightly. We are stronger together. With renewed determination, they chanted louder, their voices rising above the cacophony of the darkness. By the light that guides us, we call upon the forces of protection. The shadows twisted violently, but the light from the locket flared, illuminating the clearing in a brilliant glow. Jake felt the energy pulsing through him, feeding off the collective strength of the townsfolk. The darkness writhed and shrieked, trying to escape the light, but it was no match for the power of their united intention. "You cannot banish me!" the figure screamed, the shadows thrashing against the brilliance. "I am eternal! We choose the light!" Jake shouted, pouring everything he had into the incantation. "We will not succumb to your darkness!" The energy surged, and with one final shout, they unleashed a wave of light that consumed the shadows, enveloping the figure in a blinding glow. The darkness shrieked in agony, its form flickering and twisting as the light pushed it back, illuminating the clearing in a brilliant radiance. But even as the light flared, Jake felt a pang of fear. The shadows may have retreated, but he could sense that this was not the end. The darkness was cunning and relentless, and he knew it would return. As the figure dissolved into a swirl of darkness, Jake felt the weight of their victory settle heavily upon him. "We did it," he breathed, staring at the altar, now bathed in light. "But it's not over. We need to uncover the truth behind this darkness." The townsfolk began to murmur, glancing nervously at each other. "What do we do now?" Clara asked, fear creeping into her voice. "We dig deeper," Jake replied, his voice steady. "There's a reason this darkness exists, and we need to uncover its origins. We have to understand what we're dealing with if we want to end it for good." But even as he spoke, he felt the shadows lingering just beyond the light, waiting for an opportunity to reclaim their hold. The whispers returned, soft yet insistent, wrapping around his mind like a sinister fog. "You cannot escape your fate. The darkness will rise again." Determination surged within him. They had faced the shadows, but he would not rest until he had uncovered the truth. Together with the townsfolk, he would fight against the darkness that had claimed so many lives, drawing upon their collective strength to illuminate the hidden secrets of Eldridge Hollow. As they began to make their way back through the woods, Jake felt the weight of the night pressing down on them, but he also felt a flicker of hope. They had stood against the darkness, and though it would rise again, they would be ready. The truth awaited them, and he would not stop until it was revealed. In that moment, he realized that the shadows may loom, but they would not dictate his fate. The light within him burned brightly, a beacon of hope against the encroaching darkness, and he was ready to face whatever awaited him in the abyss. Together, they would uncover the truth, confront the darkness, and reclaim Eldridge Hollow from its malevolent grip. Chapter 10. The Final Choice. The dawn broke over Eldridge Hollow, casting an eerie light that filtered through the thick fog that clung to the town like a shroud. Jake stood at the edge of the woods, staring into the dark depths where he had faced the shadows just hours before. He felt a weight settle in his chest, a mixture of hope and dread. They had pushed the darkness back, but the battle was far from over. The whispers still echoed in his mind, a constant reminder that the malevolent force was waiting, lurking just beyond the edge of the light. Gathering the townsfolk around him, he felt their anxiety as palpable as the mist surrounding them. The faces that stared back at him were drawn and weary, but there was also a flicker of determination igniting in their eyes. "We did what we could last night," he said, his voice steady. "But I can feel the darkness rising again. We need to confront it directly, to uncover the truth behind the altar and the sacrifices that have been made." "Jake, what if we can't?" Sarah's mother asked, her voice trembling as she stepped forward. "What if we face something we can't fight?" Jake looked at her, the pain in her eyes reflecting the fear he felt within himself. "If we don't face it now, it will only grow stronger. We can't let fear control us any longer. We need to gather everything we know about the altar, about the rituals. We must be prepared for whatever we might encounter." The townsfolk exchanged glances, uncertainty dancing on their faces. "What kind of rituals?" Clara asked, her brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" Jake took a deep breath, summoning the memories of the stories they had shared, the histories that had been passed down through generations. "We need to learn about the sacrifices that were made to the altar, the offerings that were given to appease the darkness. If we can understand its origins, we may find a way to confront it, to break its hold over Eldridge Hollow." "Then we need to visit the old library," Tom suggested, his voice steady despite the fear that lingered in the air. "There are records of the town's history there, along with old books that might contain the rituals." The group nodded, a renewed sense of purpose igniting within them. They made their way to the old library, its exterior weathered and worn, the door creaking ominously as they entered. Dust hung in the air, thick and heavy, as if the building itself were a relic of the past that had been forgotten. As they fanned out through the rows of dusty shelves, Jake felt the weight of history pressing down on him. The library felt alive, filled with whispers of the past, and he was determined to uncover the secrets it held. He pulled a book from the shelf, its spine cracked and fragile, the pages yellowed with age. "Look at this," Jake called out, motioning for the others to gather around. The title read, Eldridge Hollow, A History of Shadows. As he flipped through the pages, dark stories of sacrifices and rituals unfolded before him, tales of desperation that echoed through the ages. "There it is," he said, pointing to a passage that described the ancient altar. The townspeople once offered sacrifices to appease the darkness, items of significance, loved ones taken too soon. They believed it would protect them, but instead, it only fed the entity that dwells within the woods. The townsfolk listened intently, the weight of the words settling over them like a cold shroud. "This is it," Sarah's mother said, her eyes wide with realization. "This is how we can confront it. If we gather the items that were once offered, things that have significance, we might be able to break its hold." "What items?" Tom asked, his brow furrowed with concentration. "We don't even know what was sacrificed." Jake continued to search through the book, scanning the text for more clues. "It mentions a list of offerings made throughout the years," he said, excitement bubbling within him. "If we can find out what those items are, we might be able to reverse the ritual." As they gathered around him, Jake felt the energy in the room shift, a flicker of hope igniting amidst the shadows of despair. "We need to act quickly," he urged. "We can't let the darkness rise again. If we're going to reclaim our town, we have to do it now." The townsfolk nodded in agreement, determination flooding their eyes as they set out to gather the items mentioned in the book. They dispersed throughout Eldridge Hollow, scouring their homes for anything that might hold significance, relics of the past that had been sacrificed in the name of protection. Hours later, they reconvened at the library, their arms laden with the remnants of their history. Old toys, photographs, cherished belongings that had been lost over the years. The atmosphere felt charged, the weight of their collective memories swirling around them. "Now we prepare for the final confrontation," Jake said, his voice steady. "We'll return to the altar, and we'll place these offerings there. We will show the darkness that we will not back down, that we will reclaim what is ours." As they made their way back into the woods, the air felt thick with an unsettling tension. The whispers grew louder, swirling around them, echoing the fears that had taken root in their minds. "Turn back, embrace the darkness. You cannot escape your fate." Jake clenched his fists, pushing the fear aside. "We will not be swayed," he shouted into the darkness, his voice strong and resolute. "We choose the light." The trees loomed overhead as they approached the clearing, the altar standing stark against the night sky. The symbols on the stone glowed faintly, a reminder of the power that lay within. Once they reached the altar, the townsfolk arranged the items around it, forming a protective circle of memories and significance. The energy in the air pulsed with life, and Jake felt the shadows drawing closer, the darkness waiting for a moment of weakness to strike. "We stand united," he said, his voice steady as he looked at each of them in turn. "We are stronger than the darkness. We have faced it before, and we will face it again." As they began to chant the incantation, Jake could feel the energy building, the air crackling with anticipation. The shadows swirled around them, but they pressed on, their voices rising above the encroaching darkness. "By the light that guides us, we call upon the forces to protect us." The darkness writhed, the figure of the entity emerging once more from the depths, its presence filling the clearing with a chilling malevolence. "You think your memories can save you?" it hissed, voice dripping with contempt. "You are nothing but echoes in the darkness." Jake felt a surge of fear, but he pushed it aside, drawing upon the strength of the townsfolk around him. "We will not succumb," he shouted, the locket glowing brightly against his chest. "We choose the light." As they continued to chant, the shadows lunged forward, but the light from the altar flared, illuminating the clearing with a brilliant glow. The townsfolk pressed closer together, hands gripping tightly as they focused on the energy swirling around them. "Remember why we fight," Sarah's mother shouted, her voice rising above the chaos. "We fight for those we've lost, for those who cannot stand with us." With renewed determination, they poured their energy into the chant, the light growing brighter, pushing back against the shadows that clawed at their minds. "Let the shadows recede, let the darkness retreat." The entity shrieked, its form flickering as the light surged forth, enveloping the clearing in a brilliant radiance. "You think you can banish me?" it screamed, rage filling its voice. "I am eternal. You cannot escape your fate." But Jake felt the power within him, the connection with the townsfolk igniting a fierce determination. "We will not let you take us," he shouted, the light radiating from the altar enveloping them. "We are stronger together." The shadows writhed and twisted, but the brilliance of their united strength pushed back against the darkness, illuminating the clearing in a dazzling glow. The entity shrieked in agony as the light engulfed it, the whispers falling silent as the darkness receded. In that moment, Jake felt a sense of clarity wash over him. They had faced the darkness and pushed it back, but he knew the battle was far from over. The shadows might be banished for now, but they would return, and he was determined to uncover the truth behind their origins. As the light began to fade, Jake looked at the townsfolk, their expressions a mixture of relief and uncertainty. "We did it," he breathed, glancing at the altar now bathed in light. "But this isn't the end. We need to dig deeper, to understand why this darkness exists." "Then we will," Sarah's mother said, determination igniting in her eyes. "We will uncover the truth behind the altar, the sacrifices that have been made. We cannot let this darkness claim our town any longer." As they stood together in the clearing, the remnants of the shadows receding into the night, Jake felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. They were not alone in this fight, and together, they would face whatever awaited them in the depths of the woods. The truth was calling, and he was ready to answer its summons.